God damn it. Why do I keep forgetting to make these until the last minute, and why do I keep yawning when I finally do? I planned this this morning, but I didn't make it. What the hell's wrong with me? Well, now's as good a time as any, I guess. But yeah, back to the genres. Um, I've actually been a bit torn on this one because this is a genre that is a bit hard to pinpoint, a bit hard to pin down. Oh, cat's leaving. No, cat's just sitting up. The traditional phrase for it is pulp, which stems from wood pulp, which was the things that made people yawn, apparently. No, which was the main ingredient in cheap paper that stories like this were once printed on. Today, it often gets the very generic title of adventure. But when we finally see an example, we know what we're talking about. The poster child for pulp is probably Indiana Jones, but we also have things like the newer Jumanji movies, the ones with The Rock and crew, and the classic, often overlooked television series Bringing Back Alive. They are, on the surface, they are stories about quote unquote civilized people who have adventures in quote unquote uncivilized places like the jungle or the desert or other exotic locations. Exotic is probably the best word. And for a surface view of it, that's just about it. But if you dig a little deeper, and probably owing a lot to their pulpy, cheap, mass-produced story origins, the genre is in many ways a return to very simplistic entertainment roots. Villains are often very clearly villainous. Heroes are often very clearly heroic. But that doesn't mean that everything is clear cut. The old tradition of some kind of villainous traitor who presents themselves as heroic or at least well intentioned at first, but turn out to be absolutely diabolical, are a classic. Indiana Jones is definitely a guilty pleasure of mine in that respect, with so many main characters being turncoats in different ways. I'm not going to go into details. You probably all know the Indiana Jones movies. Um, but beyond this fairly simple morality, often laughably simple. Again, to use Indiana Jones as an example, Indiana Jones is not only a heroic character, he's also very moralistic about his job in spite of what he really does. He is essentially a grave robber in many ways, but he justifies it with the whole "this belongs in a museum" motto, and a very moralistic view about protecting the treasures of antiquity while he wreaks havoc through ruins and breaks just about everything he comes across. Um, and his opponents are very often in the game to abuse some kind of power or simply to make a buck with no respect for what they're really dealing with. And it often comes to bite them in the ass. So there is a very high degree of simplicity. You have to know who to root for and who to root against. And you don't really have to spend a lot of time figuring out the morals of the story. It's not, it's very black and white. There aren't that many nuances, and there definitely aren't, what do you call them? Unclear moral standpoints. There aren't that many dilemmas. You don't have a lot of anti heroes, usually, at least not in the main roles. The quirky rogue is a common secondary character, but they're rarely main characters. You don't have a lot of unclear moralistic standpoints like you do in, for example, noir or cyberpunk or some horror, things like that. You may have old quirky things like the monster who's really not a monster, or especially if you have one of those, you may even have the not a monster who really is a monster. The whole man was the monster all along. Um, one not Indiana Jones movie in the genre that is very popular and deservedly so is the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser, where you have some questions about who the monsters are, with people robbing graves and getting their just or unjust deserves, depending on how you look at it. And a more modern version is, again, The Mummy, but with Tom Cruise, a movie that I feel is undeservedly looked down upon because of things beyond its own qualities. It was basically the whole dark universe thing that they wanted to make that kind of ruined the idea of the movie. The movie itself is perfectly fine, but people just didn't like the idea that it was trying to deliberately start a big cinematic universe, and it kind of sacrificed too many of its own qualities to shoehorn that in, but that one really pushes the whole man versus monster thing, as the main character becomes a monster, and as the monster essentially has some some redeeming traits. Again, the whole point is that the genre is usually fairly black and white, but these dare to cross that divide a little bit more. But what I'm getting a tail thrown in my face all the time right now. I can show you. Not safe for work. This is a cat's ass stepping on my chest and trying to find its place to lie down while whipping me in the face with its tail. Carrot, you are wicked. Um, but what occurred to me is that the, let's call it pulp adventure, just to uh, cross all our bases off, pulp adventure genre has more or less been given a more modernized, or even multiple more modernized versions of itself. And my thoughts here go to the Jurassic Park franchise, mainly the original Jurassic Park, and actually not the first one as much. The first one has a an element of the pulp adventure genre to it, in that it's people in the quote unquote wild. As soon as they get off the tourist track, or at least as soon as things start to break down, they are basically in the wild fighting dinosaurs. But especially the two original sequels, not the new modern ones, which do have a lot of it too, but especially Jurassic Park, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3, because they directly venture into the unsafe zones without having the whole actual park um, concept wrapped around it. They are just people going straight into the wild, into dinosaur infested territory, and trying to accomplish things. They are very much using the old adventure spirit, and in a very pulpy fashion. But they clearly aren't the old Nazi or commie fighting archaeology heroes. But what mainly makes Pulp Adventure stand out, apart from the simplicity, is, first of all, there is usually a lot of action and daring to it. It's not the most mental genre, although some stories are smarter than others. They are very physical and often very action based genres. Some more excessively than others. Some are violent, some are not. But there's usually a lot of action in it, and a lot of the excitement is based in the action. But they also stand out by the fact that there is an underlying tone of a few people or even one person can make a huge difference in the face of massive forces or massive organizations. Of course, the classic example is Indiana Jones constantly running rings around whole bands of Nazis, or one of them in the fourth one, communists, but also in, for example, both the Mummy movies, the very normal, borderline realistic heroes, um, being Indiana Jones in the Indiana Jones movies, and the various heroes, either Brendan Fraser or Tom Cruise's characters in the Mummy movies, being singular individuals who manage to face off against supernaturally powerful evils. Um, in both the Mummy movies, of course, the Mummy, but in the Tom Cruise one, also the organization. What's it called? Pro Prolithium, Pro, Prodigium. I think it's Prodigium. It's called um, Prodigium. While in the Brendan Fraser one, there is no such actual organization, but oh, sorry, Garrett. But the main Rick O'Connell, that's the name of the character, Brendan Fraser's character, Rick O'Connell. Um, he initially is part of, I think, the British army, at least an army of some kind. He's not British, he's an American. Um, the character, Brendan Fraser also, but the character is an American, but he's initially part of the armed forces, but the armed forces get all wiped out or run away or such in battle with the ones protecting the secret of the mummy. But he doesn't, because he can make a difference, because the hero is not just a person, the hero is special, and the hero can make a difference in the face of larger forces, usually through smarts and courage. And that is, however banal it might sound, that is usually a very big part of the genre. The fact that even though you're just one person, you can make an impact, and very often to the point that the world becomes a stage for one or a few outstanding characters. It also goes for the villains sometimes. Even if you ignore supernaturally powerful villains, you have, for example, in the original Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, you have an adversary in the shape of Belloc, the other archaeologist, who is also fairly outstanding, even if not as outstanding as Indy himself. But you have these individuals who can stand out from the crowd. They are main characters in every sense of the word. And the idea that the individual can be bigger than greater forces or greater numbers is very integral to the genre. Perhaps because its roots were in these very heroic pulp um, adventure stories, where it was just about some kind of hero doing heroics, and that works best when things are kept simple and you don't question how one man can screw up entire Nazi or supernatural operations. So those are usually the themes, and because I can feel another yawn coming on, I think I'll stop here, and hopefully tomorrow I will remember to not just plan but also carry out the video before dark.